Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mr. Jessup.
Meet Mr. Jessup. He's a teacher, so I can't reveal his first name.
It's Matt.
What?
My first name is Matt. I don't mind if you use it.
Oh, okay. Well, Matt, or Mr. Jessup to his students, has been a teacher for 7 years.
So today's lesson is going to be about computational thinking. So in the middle of... I wanted to be a teacher because I wanted to have a career that was very sociable. I wanted to make a difference in children's lives.
Teaching has always been one of the most important jobs around. But it's a role that has changed quite a bit over the years.
Any questions?
It was opened. And back then teachers were a lot stricter. Every morning they would check students' nails, hair and teeth to make sure they were clean.
The insolence of that child.
And teachers were allowed to use a cane to hit children who were playing up.
Strokes of the cane.
Classrooms looked pretty different as well. There were no computers, and pens looked like this. You had to dip them into inkwells to write. There were also lessons on how to keep your back straight, and boys and girls had different subjects they had to study. Home economics for the girls and wood and metalwork for the boys. And up until the 1940s, most kids left school when they were 14.
The engineering problem they're solving would take an experience.
But over the years, schools changed, and so did the way teachers taught.
We'll have the time of our life.
Today, there are all sorts of classrooms and teachers. Some schools are bilingual, which means lessons are taught in 2 different languages. And some lessons can take place without a teacher having to be in the same room.
Over to Max.
What animal do you want?
Yep, an animal, that's correct.
Teachers are now educated at university, and they work hard to find the best way to help kids to learn.
These days it's more common for children to negotiate with you about what they want to work in, what their interests are and what they would like to do. What does move it forward mean?
And Mr. Jessup's class reckon he's doing a pretty good job.
Well, he likes to engage us in our learning, makes it fun and does most activities in groups, which allows us to collaborate and have fun while we're learning.
Previously with other teachers, I haven't liked maths a lot because I'm not very good at it, but with Mr. Jessup, he's really helped me and he makes maths really fun and easy to understand.
He's fun, he's kind, he can teach you things while not making it feel like really hard, sit down, work.
You possibly could. Do you know what's best to try?
So we could see the teaching, but we're focused on the technology in the classroom. So as you see, technology and education go hand in hand since the beginning, and like using something as simple as pen and paper all the way to now using smart devices in the classroom, right? And ironically, some things look pretty much the same. Some classrooms look very identical, right? And that also gives you some food for thought, right? Because that means that some things don't need change despite the advances of technology, right? But we're gonna get more into that later. So that's a small glimpse of how technology has evolved in the classroom to the point where we are today. Let me move forward here. So this is a question for people here. What technology do you use for your teaching practice, and who provides access to such technology? Does the school bring it? Do you bring it yourselves?
No.
What technology do you use for your teaching practice? Computer? Do you use a computer for teaching?
Yeah, good morning. Yes, I actually use a projector. Also, I use the speakers. And sometimes basically every day, from Monday to Friday, I use the computer and some audio videos and many things, right? Just to teach my class.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and who provides the technology? Does the school give it to you, or do you or is it yours?
Well, with the computer, I take it to school, and the projector, the school, the university, and well, basically the university because of all the internet and the access and everything. Yes, it's on behalf of them.
That's right, and that is we have this we have the context, we have the limitation of what we are provided with, right? Sometimes we have access to some technology ourselves and we bring it to the classroom, right, when it's possible, but it's usually a mixture, especially here in Mexico. It's a mixture of technologies that are provided to us by the school, and sometimes a little bit of ours that we also are able to bring into the classroom. So now we're going to talk about what ICTs are, and you might be familiar with this term, right? In ICT stands for Information and Communication Technologies, right? This is what is called TIC in Spanish, Tecnologías de la Información y Comunicación, right? And it is a diverse set of technological tools and resources used to communicate, to create, disseminate, store, and manage information. And these technologies also encompass computers, the internet, broadcasting technologies such as radio and television, and telephones, and additionally, it's not just using a single tool, right? Because when we go into the classroom, it's not like we're just using internet or we're just using the computer. Usually it's a combination, right? That computer with speakers and projector and internet access, and all of that combination is what makes ICTs into something palpable to make it something palpable in teaching practice. Yes. And here we have a video of ICTs in the classroom and evolution, right? For the sake of the flow of today's talk, I'm not going to play it back here, but the link is here if you're interested, right? In fact, I'm going to copy it. Let me see if I can copy it. Doesn't let me copy it. Well, it's here. And if you're interested, you can type it or take a screenshot and look for it later. And it's a very interesting video of how educational technology has evolved, right? All the way from the beginning, using the first printing in the classroom, all the way to virtual reality nowadays. And it's a very nice complete video, right? But in general, that's the gist of ICTs, right? So a reflection, like I was saying before, sometimes technology doesn't really take off all the way. For example, the smart boards. Remember when the smart boards were all the rage, to have an intelligent board and supposedly that was going to replace the traditional boards with markers, and it never took off, right? I mean, we did have it, but not to the extent of every classroom would have one of those, right? Also, tablets, they haven't fully replaced pen and paper. Also, I mean, it's still the 21st century, and even though we have a lot of progress regarding technology in the classroom, we still don't have computers in every classroom, right? So why haven't all of these taken off? What do you think is the reason? And it could be different factors, right? Usually places where it might be easier for access, or they have more resources, but usually that's a big factor, right? For example, the traditional whiteboard or blackboard, it's something that is already proven. It just works. And I don't know if you did use, once you got it working, it was fine. But in the beginning, it wasn't a walk in the park. It was a little difficult to get the idea, right? Like you had to use, well, the last time I used a smart board, you had to use like a special pen, and it had tons of buttons. And also you had some sections on the board where you could click. And if you go from one school to another school, it's completely different. right? So it's not as easy or as universal as just grabbing your marker and writing on the whiteboard. So it's something that just works, and it didn't. I mean, it's good to have the experimentation to move forward, right? But it's something that just works, and sometimes it's made unnecessarily complicated with technology. Also, tablets and pen and paper. We do see massification of electronic devices in some schools, right? It all comes down to budget in this case, but we still see pen and paper sold, and tablets are getting cheaper and cheaper, but it's still not to the point where a tablet is going to replace pen and paper. You know, electronic devices rot eventually, the batteries die, they fail, and pen and paper, they also have advantages and disadvantages, but it's been proven with enough care, right, that it stands the test of time. So again, it's something very elemental that is empowered by technology, but it doesn't really replace. It complements coexistence. The same with computers in every classroom, right? It would be great to have a computer in every classroom, but sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes it is. Depends also on your school level, right? But yeah, definitely. This is also it all comes down usually to budget situations and stuff like that. But it's more like technology. I was a strong supporter of technology before, and I still am. Right, I'm studying a PhD in educational technology. But one of the things I learned was to pick your battles when implementing technology in the classroom. Like, if it works, why break it with technology? Ironically, however, if you implement technology in a meaningful way, it can empower your teaching practice in a way that you don't go back to traditional stuff. And that's the point of this talk, to help you discover the way in meaningful strategies that take advantage of your teaching context, and also on your own teaching style. So now we're going to talk about ICTs and ELT. Yes, and you might be familiar with some of these memes. Yes, and teachers are usually found. We are cliche in this way, right? That this is our starter packs, as you have seen sometimes on social media, right? That we need to use the verb to be. We use boom boxes and the bottle of water, and nowadays the Kahoot and stuff like that, like the principles of some educational technology, right? But we're still cool, right? Because the other teachers from other subjects don't have to bring all of these to the classroom, right? So the ELT classroom and other classes, they are different, right? If you teach English, you notice that we have differences in the classrooms, right? For example, teacher just presenting his topics and reading something from the book, and that's it. But in the ELT classroom, it's different. We usually have audio, right? Like we have we might not have boomboxes anymore, or we might still, but we have now usually speakers. We have posters, although they're being replaced little by little with projectors, but some schools still use posters. What else? We use a lot of material for different kinds of learners, for visual, kinesthetic learners, visuals, posters, cue cards. We might have unconventional seating arrangements, like seating them on circles or in a U-shaped form, etc. And why is this, right? Because usually, we practice for scales, so classes are more communicative. They're noisier in a good way and in a bad way, but I like to think of the glass half full. So noisier, it can also mean good. I mean, it's not a serious class. It could be something fun. It's communicative. It's playful. Yes. And that's why, I mean, it has different needs than traditional instruction. So that is the difference between the ELT classroom and other classes. And now talking a bit about my experience, my personal experience in teaching, I'm going to show you a picture from my early beginnings of my teaching practice. Please don't laugh. And yeah, and this dude is me, and here is also me. And yeah, and I started teaching back in 2004, and it was a very different situation technology wise, right? When I started teaching, back in 2004, so it's almost 20 years. Almost 20 years. We had boom boxes and scratch CDs. And I emphasize scratch CDs because it was very difficult to find an audio CD that worked well, right? And we had to fight for who had the CD in the boom boxes, in the old boom boxes at school. Yes. We also had overhead projectors, and we had CRTs on wheel carts. Yes. And we had these big TVs that now kids nowadays, they just know it for the retro video games, right? And stuff like that. But back then it wasn't for retro video games. Those were the big state-of-the-art TVs, right? But well, we had the wheel carts, and we had to fight for who was going to use the wheel cart in their classroom. And we took it to the classroom, and we already had the next teacher in the schedule waiting out of the classroom to go and take it out, right? Because it was his turn. That was the big thing. And if it was a nice school, you had DVD. If not, you had VHS, right? Then we also had colorful iMacs if it was a fancy school, and or just traditional computers, right? But the colorful iMacs were the thing back then. If you remember, if you were there back then, it was something out of this world, right? And the mouse was shaped like a little spaceship. It was something very surreal, right? And a very different picture back in 2004. Yes. And then, we skip ahead like a decade later, and we saw a change, right, in some schools. And little by little, schools started to change, and gone were the big TVs. Now we had flat screens, sometimes DVD, but mostly everything was replaced, having the boom box and the TV and stuff, to having computers in the classroom with projectors and speakers and internet access. So that means that we could now use YouTube for our instruction, look for articles on the internet and play and put them on the screen. And it was a very interesting time, right? I still cherish it a lot, the 2010s, using all of that. And I remember from a personal anecdote, when I had an injury in one of my legs, when I started my current work, actually, as a whiteboard, using Word. I opened Microsoft Word, projected it on screen, and that was my board because I couldn't stand up because of the injury. And it didn't replace it, but I did find, interesting ways, such as changing colors, highlighting, using tables, things that still miss the whiteboard, but I proved that it wasn't really necessary, right, with technology. However, it still felt like something was missing, right? So well, that's the point of presential education, right? The combination of things. And now we move forward again to the next decade. Yes, and now we have smart device-accused learning. We have management systems, gamification, web conferences, online collaboration, QR codes, AR, VR, Zoom, Teams, Meet, etc. Right, and we are all bombarded. We have been bombarded by technology as of late, and after these days, I've been very impressed with AI, artificial intelligence, and I must say something that I didn't think so soon that I would be saying, but for the first time, was afraid of my job being, obsolete, made obsolete by a computer. Why? Because recently, in the PhD, a colleague of mine, we know I'm a teacher, so his abstract in English, and he says, "Can you take a look at it?" And you said, "Oh, sure." I took a look at his abstract. He said that he used Google Translate, and I remember, Google's Translate. Yeah, I remember back in the day when they used Google Translate, and it looked like butt. It was completely, very off translations, and I read it, and I was like, oh, like the quality of the translation was something else. Like, honestly, I just made a couple of changes, small, not cosmetic. It was style changes, right? That because, in English, in Spanish, we are, like we say, we are very rolleros. We like to extend a lot, to make long paragraphs. And in English, it's like short control bursts of language. And I just made like a couple of changes where the paragraphs were getting overly long. And, but yeah, I mean, it was really surprising. It was really surprising to see the quality of the translation made by artificial intelligence. And for the first time in a long time, I saw, as a translator, I saw myself obsolete because of the quality of the translation and the speed, the speed. I mean, it was like, honestly, he could have sent it like that. And I mean, yeah, it would have looked a little funny, but still acceptable, right? So well, that's now, why do we use ICTs in the classroom? Yes, we have different reasons. And this video is we're going to watch an extract of the video, right? Only an extract. And we're going to get a glimpse, yes, so that we can start thinking about it. Let's watch a segment.
It's a tragedy that as the world outside school changes faster and faster, the majority of American kids are not being set up to succeed in the future that's coming. We're entering a world where there's not a lot of value on just kind of sitting there and doing what you're told. Increasingly, a computer could do that kind of stuff. We are eventually going to create a new model of education suited to the 21st century instead of the last half of the 19th century. This is going to happen. We're just trying to make it happen sooner.
That's it. So, according to the video, the world is changing, yes, and education is responding to those changes, right? So that is one of the main reasons. Why else would we use ICTs in the classroom? Only because it's needed, or do you also use it voluntarily? Anyone can say or type in the chat. It's very, how do you say? It's very interesting, right? I see a hand raised. Javier?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, nowadays, as I was watching the video, technology is but here is important to mention that there should be a balance, because technology for purpose education, and we have to balance for example, if we are giving class, focus all time in technology, maybe like a resource, or maybe like reinforce something, or because apply some activity, but it really helps. But in my case, I try to use the technology in a balance, to don't use a lot. Try to there should be that balance, I consider.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, students, Maria. And yeah, that's the point, right? We use it, and actually, you both encompass both of my points, right? Nowadays, we have globalization and the communicative nature of language, right? Now we live in a globalized world where we need to facilitate, we need to ease communication between individuals in different geographical, social, and cultural contexts, right? Unlike other disciplines of a theoretical way, language learning is more practical because it's communicative. Every message that you produce needs to be interpreted, right? And also, that's one side of the coin. So we use it because we need to. We need to teach our students. I mean, not in English per se, but in the whole educational system, we need to teach our students. They need to be competent in the competences, in the competences of the 21st century, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to be using, etc. Yes, on one side, they need it because it's what they need to use in the new world. And on the other side, the use of technologies for example, in English for specific purposes, particularly, I chose that one. I didn't choose that one, but I found a very good reflection on that. Yes, it enables construction and learning of acquiring knowledge, relating to other people, sharing and ideas, information, and learning how to communicate, especially learning how to learn. So that's right now the tendency is not only on ICTs. There's a term in Spanish that is called tax, which the tendency now is learning technologies that empower education so that you can learn better. Yes. And that's the point, right? And the challenge is as teachers, and here, this is for right now, those students are young, but eventually they're going to face the situation that we all have to face, right? That we teachers, we get old and we are teaching students that are a different generation than us, right? And the first time I faced it was, so you can get the context, right? The first time I faced it was when I was teaching kids back in 2004, and I was trying to, in my little head, I don't know what went through my head, but I was trying to give Friends references. Obviously, kids didn't watch Friends back then, but I found it second nature to just come up with a reference to Friends, and of course they didn't laugh, they didn't understand it because it wasn't their generational, something attractive to their generation, obviously. And that's something that you still face, like when we try to come up with fun memes, fun for us, right? But they were fun. That's the thing, right? We are faced with students that are a different generation than us. So the benefits of properly implementing ICTs in ELT is that we make learning attractive for the digital natives. That's the name of this generation of students, that they were born with technology. They're digital natives, and it makes their learning meaningful. Yes. Also, it leaves autonomous learning, right? So, and also that all comes back to the TAC term, tecnologías del aprendizaje y conocimiento. It helps. They help you learn more. Yes, and back then the concept of education was in school was that you had to learn a lot of things. Yes, and a lot of things for your discipline, and you were now the professional that knew everything about it. But nowadays, the tendency is not to know everything, because the world is advancing so fast that what you learn today is obsolete tomorrow. And literally, it's like you buy a computer today. Just in this morning talk, I found out I was thinking of getting a new computer, and I'm thinking, well, right now I don't have the budget, but we live in a teacher salary. But a Mac computer for pure hardware and pleasure. And I noticed that they announced yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, but the video had a few hours only up, and they announced a new Mac Mini, and I was like, whoa. I still haven't been able to get a Mac Mini, and they announced that. So it is what it is, right? Technology is advancing every day. And now what we teach, we don't teach things that are set in stone. Instead, we have to teach our students how to keep learning. And that's the point of learning technologies. And how we apply them in ICTs, in ELT. Well, that's part of my study, is the use of digital ecosystems in ELT in on-site education. Yes, and also online, but I was that's the main point. But I'm studying the use of digital ecosystems, and in my university we use Microsoft Teams as the digital ecosystem. That's what we are provided by the school, right? So, long story short, the results with students were positive. From a sample of my students, they all use the platform Microsoft Teams. And I say they all use because it wasn't really graded. I mean, it wasn't required for them to use it. However, they had access to it and they used it. All of them. Yes. All of them used it on their smartphones, and most of them used it on the computer, as you see on the graphic on the left. Yes. And how they used it? They used it to communicate, mostly to communicate with me a night before that they wanted an extension for the homework. That was the main use. But kidding aside, it was to communicate with the teacher, mostly. Second place, to download materials. I would place, lists of verbs and videos for self-study and stuff like that, and also to send announcements. I would send you can buy the book at this store, and I send the flyer, and tomorrow we don't have class, and send the flyer and stuff like that, right? So it was that way. Students that for some reason didn't show up had an easier time to be communicated and staying in the loop in the classroom. Also to check grades. I would publish grades, and the next day, teacher, please